What's going on, guys? Andrew Piluk Hockey here, back again with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the recent reports about Josh Manson and whether or not the Toronto Maple Leafs would be interested. Now, I'm going to start off this video by saying something that I mentioned in my live stream because I did a live stream last week, or it was the week before, something like that. It's been crazy lately, but a lot of people were asking about Josh Manson, and I like Josh Manson. He'd be an awesome addition to this Leafs team, but I want to personally start off this video by saying I don't believe that this is going to happen. I think it's insane to think it's going to happen. The reason why is because of the standings, and we'll get into that in a second, but what I would really appreciate is if you are new here to like this video and subscribe, join the squad. I'd love to have you guys here. I do have social media as well. If you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I'd really appreciate that. But I know there's a lot of people watching that aren't subbed. Trust me, tons of videos are coming. I've posted a lot already, but even more rumors and trade stuff is coming. But the reason why this video is happening is because on Hockey Night in Canada, Hockey Night in Canada, I can't even speak today. Elliot Friedman mentioned that talking about the injury to Josh Manson, because he was injured, and we'll get to that in a second, but they're trying to see how long he's going to be out. I'm not positive how long he's going to be out. I haven't checked in on that, but he's obviously a UFA, so he's unrestricted. So this summer he will be a free agent. Any team can contact him to sign him. Now, there is interest from other teams to see if he will be available, and Toronto is one of the teams, and that was one of the teams that Elliot Friedman mentioned. Now, the reason why this is intriguing is because, first of all, he could have just been mentioning Toronto because it's easy to do that. But if they're interested, that's a good thing. It means the Leafs are looking to upgrade on the top four of their blue line, which is something that they need to do. You can see here a bunch of fancy numbers, and I know some people don't like when I bring up this stuff because I know some other channels do. I try to keep it simple here. I do like looking at defensive metrics and stuff like that, but what you basically need to know, and if you want to check out the article on the leafsnation.com, you can. That's where this is from. He does really well. He has he's getting it says it here, it explains it here. It's an equal amount of luck at both ends of the ice. He's not doing too bad. His turnover plus minus stands at 5, which would top all Leaf blue liners. He has laid 50 more hits than he has taken and has a combined 133 hits and blocks. And obviously he'll drop the gloves when he needs to. He's fought a few times in 2021. I don't think he's fought in this year yet, but it's very interesting because, him adding with Jake Muzzin here would obviously make a lot of sense, but this is where it doesn't make sense to me. Anaheim is second place in the Pacific Division with the potential to be first. If Vegas slips in a few games, they lose 3 or 4 games because they do have a couple games in hand. Anaheim wins a few, and now all of a sudden they're first in the Pacific. I don't understand why they would trade a top 4 or top 2 defenseman, however you look at Manson, when they're that close to being a contender. I mean, they're playing really well. They've got a really young, exciting squad. Obviously, they've got a ton of guys that are just wicked, Zegras being one of them, but they just look good. They're an up-and-coming younger team that just has been winning a lot this year. So to me, looking at these standings, this is where it starts to not make sense for me, but we're going to look into this because so many people have been on me about making this video. So like I said, Josh Manson did get injured. It was an upper body injury. So we'll have to see where this takes us, but just to put that into context, he is injured. Now, if we're looking at his cap hit, he's got a $4.1 million cap hit. So this is clearly something to look at because, I mean, the guy is going to cost the Leafs a little bit of money to obtain. They're going to need 50% retention. But what I will get into is the fact that some people don't fully understand how the cap could work and how the Leafs could do something similar to what they did last year to acquire players that are expensive. So Earl Schwartz tweeted on January 24th, so this is a few days old now, but at the time it was 12 straight days where the Leafs were $350,000 under the cap. They used $0 in their recall. They used zero recall 6 times in that span and seem content to keep doing so, which is what they're doing. And they're going to accrue cap space by doing that. So in simple terms, if they keep using the roster emergency exception to remain $350,000 under the cap until the deadline, they'll have roughly $1 million on top of whatever money they move out. Not a lot, but more than the usual dollar in, dollar out for Toronto. So Basically, what that means is if the Toronto Maple Leafs can find a way to get rid of some money, which is very possible, they can bring in better contracts because they can do what they did with Foligno, get teams to retain 50% and then get another team to retain 50%. So if you do that, it would obviously be less than like a couple $1 million for Josh Manson if you got a couple teams to retain, including the Ducks. But again, that makes zero sense for the Ducks to do because they should be a buyer. Why would they want to take back 50% of Manson's contract unless the Leafs are going to pay a king's ransom? And what I mean by that is it's a first-round pick, a top prospect, and then probably another pick or prospect or maybe both. You can say I'm nuts, but it's a top 4 defenseman. Manson doesn't need to go anywhere, and the Leafs would have to get them to retain 50% of the contract, and they would have to, get a third team involved in there. If you think that that's too much, then you haven't seen the history of how people have been traded and how defensemen are treated towards the trade deadline, especially a top 4 guy who's physical, who can give you some points. He's not having the best offensive year, but still, it doesn't matter. He's a guy that's going to provide a lot of different things, including hits. Obviously, you can see currently second on the Ducks right now in hits. This would rank him pretty high on the Leafs. I believe he would be second on the Leafs in hits. I haven't checked, but this is where it gets interesting, and this is where I wanted to bring you guys because this is the cap situation for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So currently how the roster is constructed, like I said, they could have $1 million in cap space at the deadline based on accrued cap space. So that number wouldn't actually be $341,000. It would be more. Now, something interesting to think about, and I've brought this up before. People think it's impossible to trade Nick Ritchie. Let's just say they trade that contract. We're using this long-term IR as trade block. These guys are traded, hypothetically. That would give the Leafs $1.7 million plus the $1 million of accrued cap space, or roughly $1 million of accrued cap space. Then if you're trying to bring in another defenseman, you're more than likely trading a guy like Travis Dermott as well to fit in, having the depth of having maybe a second pairing of Muzzin and Manson, and then having Sandin and Hall, and then Sandin and Liljegren, or Hall and Liljegren. No matter what the pairings are, you'll have a depth defenseman instead of just having these 6. Liljegren would more than likely be your depth guy, or Hall would be your depth guy. You would have a much stronger top 4. You'd have a true shutdown pairing in Muzzin and Manson, or you could go with Brody and Manson on any given night. You would be able to upgrade significantly because that's $3.2 million if you're able to maybe include Dermott in a trade for a defenseman like Manson, or include Nick Ritchie in a different deal to try to get rid of that money. Because again, people think it's impossible to trade that contract. Go back in the history of the NHL in the last 10 years. There have been terrible contracts dealt. Sure, you have to pay for it. If the Leafs have to give up a second or a third, or maybe a third and a B to C level prospect to get rid of that Ritchie contract, if it means they're bringing in a top 4 defenseman in a different trade, you have to do it. You have to clear out that money. You have to find a way to do it, because this $3.2 million could turn into a $6 million player if you're able to get a team to retain 50% on a guy. You get him in at $3 million. This would easily fit a guy like Josh Manson if you got a team to eat 50% of the contract. Maybe that's where a third team becomes involved in the deal and they eat, a lot of the contract, so that way Anaheim doesn't have to. There's a lot of different ways the Leafs could move here. We've even heard the recent rumors that the Leafs could potentially be looking at trading Peter Mrazek for a cheaper backup goaltender. There's a lot of different ways that the Leafs can move here. And as much as I don't think Manson is a real possibility unless the Leafs really, really pay high on this guy and bring him in for this playoff run, the Leafs still have money to make a move. And I keep stressing that. There is very, 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 very many ways that the Leafs can make this happen, not just for a guy like Manson, but for a defenseman that they want to bring in, or maybe a cheaper defenseman plus a forward, like a top 6 guy. They can make it happen. It's just whether or not they want to get rid of more assets, more of their future. I believe they should. If you're trying to win now, like, I don't understand why you're going to hold on to these things. Sure, it's good to bring in depth and good to bring in prospects, but the Leafs aren't going to have a window forever to compete with this group. They're not going to have a window to compete with guys that are still in their prime, guys that are still on this team for cheap contracts. They're getting good years out of guys like Bunting and Kasha and even Spezza and Kampf, and Kerfoot's having a career year. Tavares is like a point per game. Nylander's tearing it up. Matthews is tearing it up again. Marner's starting to really pick it up again. Brody has been amazing. Riley's going to give you that offense. Campbell is a Vezina candidate at this point. You have the opportunity to give Muzzin a really true top four shutdown pairing defenseman, whether it's Manson or somebody else. You have to go all in. You have to push in all your chips and go, we need to have a team that can be competitive. We need to bring in a top four guy. We need to bring in a depth forward that can score. You have to figure out the way to do it. Manson could be the guy in a perfect world. If the Ducks were not a good team this year, he would be a slam dunk, easy trade for the Leafs to make. They would pay out the ass for him, no problem. It would make sense. This year, it seems like if a team wants Manson, you're going to have to blow Anaheim out of the water, because what message are you sending to your fans if you trade a top four or top two defenseman while you're a top two team in your division? It makes no sense to me. The Manson stuff makes no sense to me. But just as a content creator and as somebody who likes to listen to what people are telling me to make videos on, because I do appreciate you guys, I had to make this video, especially since Elliot Friedman also mentioned it. It made too much sense to make the video, but in terms of likelihood, I would put this at like a 10% chance, and that's probably being generous, because I just don't believe that Anaheim would want to trade this guy. So let me know what you guys think down below. If you are new here, like this video and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video or stream. Peace.